that you were at that time pregnant, and this was in fact your second surrogacy.
Yes.
And the first surrogacy, I believe, you gave birth to twins.
Yep.
Yeah, and everything went fine and nothing, no problems. And so you thought, well, why not do this again? And then at 24 weeks, tell me, how did you find out you had breast cancer?
So I went into a routine OB appointment, and my OB found a lump in my right breast. So she sent me for a biopsy. That next week is when it came back that it was positive for breast cancer. So that was like May 17th, I believe.
Yeah.
So she sent me obviously to oncology. We kind of started that process of registering that I have cancer while pregnant.
And that was probably a big bomb dropped in your lap. You weren't expecting that at 24 weeks pregnant. And you were pregnant with a singleton, one baby, correct?
Yep, one.
Yeah. And so when you found out that you had breast cancer, what was your next? Did you contact the intended fathers?
First, I told my agency because I wasn't sure how I was supposed to handle that, because it's obviously nothing I've ever dealt with before. I made it very clear to my OB, my oncology team, and the agency that my main focus was making sure that I could continue the pregnancy and that the baby would be okay, which the oncology team confirmed at that time. The cancer that I had, it was totally fine for me to continue and do the AC. So I forgot the cancer or the chemo names, but it was confirmed that those were both safe for pregnancy with a high-risk OB and my OB and the oncology team. So then they told the parents.
Okay, and my understanding was that some of the treatment that they wanted you to go on for your cancer was not conducive to the pregnancy.
Yeah, I forgot about that. So there's 4 drugs they wanted me to do because of the HER2 positive. Those 2 of the HER2 positive drugs I wasn't able to start until after I had the baby, but they were still confident that I would be okay waiting to start those other 2 and do just the first 2 for now to get me through the rest of the pregnancy.
Okay. So when the agency contacted the dads, what was the response? What came back?
They were upset, obviously, scared, worried. They kind of freaked out a little bit, which you would expect because they just, found out that their surrogate has cancer. They seemed to calm down a little bit. They wanted to be in like every single appointment. They wanted my oncology team to be speaking to them weekly, my OB, so they wanted to kind of be a little more, they were getting a little more intrusive than I told them, like, I wanted to find out by myself, get the details, and then I would obviously relay them to them, but they weren't happy with that. They were reaching out to everybody and like emailing and like threatening lawsuits and all this. So that's when it kind of got a little crazy.
And why were they threatening lawsuits? For what?
I think they just thought that's the only thing they had. So they just were, they threatened my OB, they threatened my oncology team. So then my oncology team were like, well, we need to get our lawyers involved because we don't know if we can give you chemo without their permission. So then I reached out to my attorney. She said, yes, obviously you are, the number one priority. We can't do anything that's going to alter your care. So it was kind of a lot of back and forth with attorneys for a while.
And so the fathers thought it was their prerogative to direct your care.
Yeah.
And in what care you received or didn't receive. And I'm guessing that's because you had a signed contract, kind of like, well, we hired her. She's got to follow our rules and obey us. Or
it definitely took a turn from the way our relationship was. I felt like just a rented uterus. I felt like they only cared about their baby, which I expect them to care about their baby. I obviously cared because I didn't want anything to happen to the baby either, but they didn't care. I feel like they didn't care about me at all. They would say it to me. They would text me, be like, we're here for you, whatever you need. But then to all my doctors, they would be completely different. So it was a rough few weeks in there. Then I had I had an MRI done, which they tried to get sooner, but it got pushed out because of scheduling and everything. So that Friday I had it. That next Monday, I had a call with my oncology team, and that next day, that Tuesday, I was supposed to start the AC chemo, but the MRI showed that my breast cancer had spread and metastasized, so that chemo treatment was no longer going to work. So that's when they brought up the, termination or just having the baby and, letting medical do its job. And that's when the dads were just absolutely not. Because the whole time they didn't want a baby born before 38 weeks, which you're not even if it was a normal, healthy pregnancy, you could never guarantee, obviously, a baby to be born, 40 weeks.
And what was their reason? Did they
They
have
said
a
they
reason?
had friends and doctors, and everyone told them that even a baby born at 34 weeks is going to be blind and deaf and no chance at life. Which I had the twins at 34 and 3, I think. They're almost 2. They speak 3 languages. Like, they're incredibly healthy. So for them to throw out all these terms like, oh, no chance at life, was just mind-boggling to me. But they wanted no early labor at all.
And so my understanding is that because you were at 24 weeks, you were at home. And then how did you come to make the decision to find a hospital that would allow you to deliver the baby?
My OB and my oncology team were incredible. They tried so hard. They did everything that, I don't want to name the hospital that I was working with, that refused to deliver because of the parents had reached out to them, more lawsuits, like all the way up the chain. And they were like, we're not going to touch you with a 10-foot pole. We don't need that press. We don't need that liability. We don't, so my OB and oncology team were trying for the whole week, like lots of tears. It was just the worst week of my life. We tried everything we could do, but I didn't have time to wait. So I was forced to, do stuff that I didn't want to do. And I had the baby Father's Day morning at like 4 a.m.
Wow. And you were 24 weeks and days?
I was actually 25 weeks, exactly.
25 weeks. And you delivered vaginally?
Mm-hmm.
And was there any complications in the delivery?
When you deliver early, your placenta's not ready to come out. So that was an issue for a while. I was bleeding a lot. They were able to get it detached eventually. I just lost, over a liter of blood, and it took my iron levels down to like a level 7. So that next Wednesday, when I went in to do my first chemo, it was just awful. I was so sick because my body was, like, what the heck's going on? You just had a baby, you have no iron, no blood. So that was a rough week, but things are better.
Was your husband with you in the labor and delivery?
My mom was.
Your mom was, so you weren't.
She's a nurse, so she's very helpful, and she's an oncology nurse too, so she's been helpful.
Oh, wow. She knows way too much in your case.
Unfortunately, she does oncology with children, so it's not exactly the same. It's probably harder, but she definitely knew, all the stuff going on.
And so the dads didn't want you to have the baby. They wanted you to terminate the pregnancy. And
we had multiple families lined up that would adopt. My OB tried, because she had a good relationship with them, because she would speak to them, weekly. She would talk to them whenever they needed, which was helpful. But she tried everything she could. She's like, there's families that want to adopt. There's medical. 25 weeks is obviously not ideal. However, with the medical, advancements, babies survive and by the time they're like, 3, 4, 5, or can be perfectly healthy. But they just refused any type of medical intervention. They wanted nothing. They just wanted their baby's remains and to move on with life. Which I would never have chosen.
Did they want to have a funeral or a burial?
Oh yeah, they had the baby cremated.
And when the baby was born, was the baby born alive?
I don't really want to go too much into the details of the actual labor. It was not as traumatic as I expected.
Yeah, that's fine.
But all I can say is the baby is not alive, and the parents should have their remains by now, and it's not why I did surrogacy. I did surrogacy, to give people a baby and try to help in ways that not everybody could. And they took the whole experience and just completely ruined it. And
have you ever met them, or were they just? Yeah. Okay, so because I know you don't live in the same area.
Yeah, they live in California, just a different city. But yes, I did.
Okay, but they didn't want to be there when you gave birth.
They've had no contact with me since any of it. They haven't reached out, nothing.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And how are you doing now with just, I mean, that's a traumatic thing that you had to go through in delivering the baby, and you're also dealing with your cancer treatment.
I feel like I'm kind of numb still. I don't know if I fully processed it because I jumped right into chemo and right into, just saving my life from my own 4 children that I have. So I don't know if I've fully processed it yet because I haven't really had like a big flood of emotions, if that makes sense. I cried like the whole week leading up to the delivery, but since then I just feel like I don't have a ton of emotion because I don't really know how to handle it. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm absolutely sorry to hear you go through that. I'm wondering, I said before we hit record, just about the fertility drugs and the cancer, and we'll never know if that was a factor. It is something that just sort of nags in my, back of my mind, because there is, research out there that shows, women who are infertile that take a lot of fertility drugs, for IVF, are at more risks of, breast cancer. But we don't see that in surrogacy yet because we don't have, like tons of surrogates out there who had breast cancer that we can say, oh. Now, I've also done work in the space of women who are egg donors, and I've seen a lot of egg donors who take fertility drugs in order to, provide a lot of eggs, and the connection with them. And I personally know quite a few egg donors that as young women got breast cancer.
Oh,
And
wow.
again, they don't have a family history of breast cancer because nobody would pick them as an egg donor.
Yeah.
If you check the box that you have a history of breast cancer, they're like, well, we're not going to take that young girl's eggs because she's got a history of breast cancer.
Well, that's something the dads brought up too. They tried to say that we were trying to hide that I had, they're like, did she have cancer before? Or did you know? I'm like, you have to take a ton of screening to be a surrogate. Like I did a breast exam in January before I got pregnant, so it's like all of that stuff wasn't. But we also did genetic testing. Since I found out, they did like 700 different genes and I was negative for every single one. So like the BRCA gene and all that stuff, I don't carry any of that. But this cancer is estrogen and progesterone negative. So that's where they don't think it's connected. But again, obviously there's no way to be sure. But she expected those to be positive because of through all the surrogacy, I'm pumping myself with estrogen and progesterone, for months. But it was negative for both of those. So I don't know if they're linked or not, but.
And I'm assuming your contract was a commercial contract so that you were being paid.
Mm-hmm.
And did the fathers get mad? Sometimes they want money back because you didn't produce the baby. Was there anything that?
I don't know because they haven't reached out, but I know that like since the baby was passed, obviously the money stopped. So you don't just get like a big chunk at the beginning, it's like a monthly payment. So the funds obviously stopped in June.
Yeah. But
they haven't said anything to me. I think they know they couldn't get money back. That's why maybe they haven't. But we had a pretty extensive contract. I just think that they thought they had more control than they really did.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that it came down to this situation.
I would really love to read your contract. Of course, I would keep it very confidential, but I have lots of surrogacy contracts because when I interact and meet surrogates and interview them, the first thing I usually say is, can I see your contract? Because it's interesting to see, what they've been asked to agree to, and there's usually like the reduction clauses and the termination clauses that you will consent to reducing the pregnancy. There was one California surrogate, she waived her end-of-life decision-making in her contract. So if during the pregnancy she had any kind of a head injury and needed to be on life support.
Yeah, that was in mine too.
Yeah. So, and this was a surrogate who was doing surrogacy for a couple that lived far away. So she didn't even know these people. She'd never even met them. It kind of gave me chills, as a nurse, that strangers could make a decision for her to stay on life support or not. I was like, oh my God.
That's why my contract said that I ultimately had the choice for anything that had to do with my body. So like they could request a termination, but I had the final say because it's my body. So just like with the chemo, they're like, we don't give you guys permission to give her any chemo. And the doctors are like, well, we don't need your permission because she needs it to save her life, and her life, not more important than the baby, but there's no life here, there's no baby. So they tried to like explain that to them, but they just they liked, in their head, they owned me and my body, and that's not what surrogacy is supposed to be. The contract is, while he's still inside of me, I had full control. As soon as he's born, I have no control. And they made that very clear. They made sure the hospital I was supposed to deliver at and the doctors that I was dealing with, he made sure they knew that. He made sure to go all the way up the ladder to the CEO, made sure they knew that there would be loss, so they were very loud and vocal and ruffled a lot of feathers and made a lot of noise, enough to scare people into being like, I don't know, so